Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I thought I would upload a video about units that I think need to have a slight rework here. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on these, and if there's other units that you think need to be reworked. Overall, I think with a lot of the changes that Slytherin has been doing, they've really come a long way with a lot of the balancing, but I still think there's some units that could need to be tweaked a little bit more. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe. It encourages me to post more content for you. And next we'll get started on kind of my opinions going through every faction. I think I should probably be able to do this all in one video, but we'll see how much I ramble. So the Invictor Warsuit. The big thing here is the Fragstorm missile grenade launcher is effectively the same one that the aggressors have. And what I find is at an armor piercing 1, other than attacking the most low tier infantry, it just doesn't do enough damage. And it just makes it damn near worthless because almost everything in the game has more than 1 armor. So I'd just like to see this, you know, armor piercing go up to like 3 or something like that. And that way it would, or even 2, you know, just double the armor piercing, do something so it can actually damage some infantry, especially a little bit of medium tier infantry, because right now it just makes it a useless attack. And then for the aggressors, you know, it gives you this 3 cooldown attack. It is one of the few you know, artillery pieces in the game that has an accuracy. It's not an auto hit situation compared to, you know, like the Paragon Warriors or the Tau missile pods. You know, they don't even have a cooldown. You can just spam them for 3 times back to back. So I'd just like to see this get buffed a little bit more, because certainly the Boltstorm gauntlets here, that attack is not very good either. I'd kind of like to see that damage get increased too, because I feel like if you're bringing out something for 120 points, they should be able to do a shit ton of damage and be a real nightmare, because certainly the Flamestorm gauntlets are extremely viable, especially when you're stacking up with the Hail of Fire ability, but they just don't feel like a good unit right now, and they're rarely used. So I think if you at least buffed up the Fragstorm grenade launcher and increase the armor piercing a little bit, that would go a long way. And they would start to be used. The other unit I would recommend some changes on are the Assault Terminators. I feel like the Thunderhammer Storm Shield feel great, but the Lightning Claws do not. I guess there's a couple of ways that you could change this. One, usually just increase the amount of splash damage they do, or make the splash damage more. So like 6 to 8 times 3. Or even 2. It just feels like they need to do more damage with the splash. I think it's fine keeping the base damage that way, but I feel like with having claws, you're just sitting there slashing everything around you. So these should be like AoE killers, whereas the Thunder Hammer is for tanking and single unit kills. I feel like the Lightning Claw should just be splashing like a mother to kill everything in front of you that's not armored. So that's the kind of change I'd like to see with these guys. The other thing I'm a little bit curious on, and I'm curious to know if other players have seen this, is the Black Rage. There's only a 35% chance for this to trigger, but gosh, I feel like that has not been my experience, especially with hand flamers, because what I like to do with these guys is give them a hand flamer, run in and wipe out Scarab Swarms or Gretchen or Cadian Shock Troops, and you know, that's like 10 units per squad. And I almost always, I can't think of a single time I've wiped out a full squad and I haven't gotten 5 stacks of blood range. And I guess just statistically, that doesn't make sense, because, you know, that's even at 50%, that would be 50% of the time to get that. So I don't know if it's like coding it as a much higher percentage. I mean, I actually like it being a higher percentage, because it actually adds a lot of viability and really increases the amount of play that you would have with the death companies, because then you really want to just take them out as fast as possible, because they're going to be these huge damage dealing threats, which they should be. So I'm just kind of curious if it's either just not coded correctly with the percentages, or if I've just been extremely lucky on the last 3-4 matches where I've just had way higher than the expected rolls on that 35%, but I actually like that it seems to be triggering a little bit more, because it dramatically increases the viability of the death company. But I was just curious if anybody else had thoughts on that, because I'm quite pleased with how the death company is right now, and if it is coded incorrectly, I would just kind of leave the change as it is, because it feels pretty good. And likewise, when it comes to the Necrons, I'm going to recommend that we increase the chance of their equivalent ability to be triggered more. With the Tyranids, there's a couple changes I'd like to see. One, I would like to see that the feral spawn just happen on the first turn, and then you can just start the cooldown because you have 5 ammunition, and at 2-turn cooldowns, it's just you're never going to get through all that on a standard 8 to 10 turn match. So I'd just like to see that because it's one of the weaker spawning units compared to everybody else that can spawn in units. It allows you, it helps the Tyranids because then you have additional units that you can set up your synapses for, and it also helps your opponents because if they can easily get the kill, then that'll help them get more momentum. So it helps both factions. So I would just like to see that feral spawn happen much quicker here, and then I still think you need to have at least a 2-turn cooldown. I think that's reasonable, but I would just like to see it become active on the very first turn. And then the Broodlord, you know, he's very expensive. He's a very good anti-vehicle killer. If you're going to do a Gene Stealer build, his, you know, the Evolved Brood Telepathy definitely can really help. But I would really like to see the Paroxysm range increase to 5. I think that's going to help you have more survivability to deactivate the Overwatch. It's going to help you use this guy at range if he gets all shot up so he can still be viable. I just think you need to increase the range there for sure to help you be able to get more use out of this guy, because it's almost never utilized because there's so many other better units that are cheaper. Whereas, you know, this guy's 10 points cheaper. He gets extra actions because he's going to be triggering additional kills. He's got a lot of movement. You know, he's got, yes, a little less evasion, and, but he's got more health. So I just, either you got to reduce the cost on this guy a little bit, or you got to increase the range of his ability. Just something's got to be reworked so more people use the Broodlord. So with the Hiveguard, what I would like to see with them is either their HP be increased. So I guess it comes down to this. Either you need to give the Tyranids more ranged armor piercing, because by requiring them to get into melee range to kill armor, it makes it really easy to kill the Tyranids because they really suffer against heavy mechanized forces, because you know they're going to be bringing a heavy melee ranged force, and so a couple of flamers and they're just going to completely annihilate you. So I'd like to see the Hiveguard get some HP buffs so they can become more viable when they're using the shockwave cannon, because they have to get so close to be able to land the attacks, because these are amazing vehicle killers, but they're just so easy to snipe. I just would like to see either their armor go up, a little more HP, or giving them some sort of bonus, like if within 2 tiles of a commander they get additional armor or additional bonus HP, you know, something like that. I mean, it just feels like there's got to be a little something more here, because I just feel, while they're very good units, it just feels like they need to be a little bit more, especially if they're going to be the mainstay ranged vehicle killer. Likewise, if you didn't want to buff that, what I'd like to see is the Exocrine gets like a second ability here that would be like an anti-vehicle attack, where it would be like do 90 to 100 damage, armor piercing, or, you know, something. It just feels like they need some sort of ranged attack, because I find that this does, you know, somewhere between 30 and 60 damage usually when I'm hitting a vehicle, and if these guys could either have more armor piercing or something. I mean, I understand that they don't want to go crazy with the armor piercing, because if you use the plasmatic buildup and then you get the additional damage and things, then that's going to make it, I mean, it already can practically squad wipe everything, but if you end up increasing the armor piercing of your main attack here, then I think it's going to be too powerful. But if you could just add an extra ability where it's like 2 or 3 turn cooldown for an anti-vehicle attack or something like that, and it could be the same animation, maybe just colored a little differently or something. But I just wish these guys had a little bit of a different icon here to help with that. The other option is you just create another Tyranid unit that's just like a anti-vehicle ranged killer, and that would solve the issue. I mean, they keep adding units to the roster, but they're redundant. I mean, it's like Tyranids do not have issues killing low armored units, and so that's what this is doing. And then you have to get these guys so close to be able to start shredding the armor with the burning spray that these guys blow up before they get there. And so it's like, yes, either you engage vehicles in melee, or you have effectively one unit that's really good at taking them out at range. And once those guys are taken out, then it's going to be really hard for you to get the kills. So I would just like to see a little balance going there. But otherwise, the Tyranids actually feel like they're in a pretty good spot. It's just that ranged anti-armor does not feel good right now. Another faction that's generally in a pretty good spot is the Necrons here. The only thing I'd really like to see changed with them is I would like to see the Flesh Hunger get activated a little bit higher, because it seems like at 60% this is one that I don't tend to see get activated enough, and it's so hard to get these guys to get their stacks going, and it only affects organic units that they get all that bonus damage. So you know, they don't have a lot of splash and things like that. It's just single unit kills. So, you know, for you to be able to stack that up to get full stacks, it's just so hard. I would just like to see that percentage go up quite a bit here, or even just make it, you know, like you get 1 stack per kill or something like that, to just make it more viable, because then these Flayed Ones I think would get utilized a lot more, especially against an organic faction, because I just don't see them get used very much. But otherwise, everything else I think feels like it's in a pretty good spot. I think it's kind of weird that you overwatch the Annihilation Barge with the Tesla Cannon, but, you know, even that isn't the end of the world, so... because everything else is so powerful with the Necrons, I think that's pretty reasonable. For the Adeptus Sororitas, this is another faction that I think is in a pretty good spot. I think I mentioned this on my video with my thoughts, but the only thing I'd really recommend changing is I think you should recant the Rites of Intercession not being accessible to Arcoflagellants, because I never understood why that was considered to be so overpowered that they had to take that ability, because it's like you can put it on Repentia, you can put it on, you know, your Seraphim with Infernal Pistols, but then these guys with the whips, that's like, whoa, that's crazy talk. So bring that back. I don't know why it got taken away. I think it was just people weren't experienced playing against the sisters, but because I never had it used against me in such a way where I'm like, this is so unbalanced. So, I mean, yes, they hit above their pay grade, but, you know, they have no armor, so you should be able to just easily liquidate them without much issues. And, you know, they're 20 points more than Akkadian squad that you can use to buff all your guys, or Gretchen and all that stuff. So it just feels like you need to bring that back. It's not like it's a huge buff for guys. With the Forces of Chaos here, this might be a hot take, but what I would like to see for the Bloodthirster is, I think it's weird that you're encouraged to kind of keep him in the back here to summon and then get him into combat. What I'd like to see is he does not have access to the demonic ritual. I would take that away from him, and then instead what I would do is the Dreadful Winds. I would take away the accuracy penalty there, so he would still be able to attack at full accuracy, and then it would just encourage your opponents to be throwing him into combat and just attacking as much as possible, because you have no healing abilities, right? So what happens, what I find is people attack, if you don't get the kill here, then they're just going to run him away and hide him behind a corner and just be a spellcaster, and that's not very fun. I mean, my gosh, he's a Bloodthirster of Khorne. He should be in combat continuously. So take away his summoning ability to encourage them to get him into combat as fast as possible, and then take away his damn accuracy penalty on there. I mean, this guy does not have much for armor, even though it says 7. He gets shot apart like crazy and is pretty easy to kill. And yeah, he does a ton of damage. The other thing that really annoys the heck out of me is he has that stupid little donkey kick when he gets counterattacked. It's like, here you have this major weapon that does 100 to 140 damage if you land an attack, and then if he gets attacked in melee, he counterattacks with this little dinky little kick here that does like 30-40 damage. Either dramatically increase the damage of his counter to make him a respectable killer, as he should be as a Bloodthirster, or just get rid of that stupid animation, just have him do a regular attack with the Axe of Khorne and do full base damage, similar to what the Canonist can do. because my god, he costs 300 points. So, you know, make him an absolute shit brick house killer here and take away his summoning abilities to make it a little more balanced. That's what I would recommend. The other thing I would recommend changing here is with the Daemon Prince. It's like if you're going to charge 40 requisition points to get an axe that's going to do, you know, 20 extra damage with some armored piercing, make the axe also have some splash damage so he can actually do some damage against most of the other units that are in front of him too. I mean, my god, why are you doing this? Give it 2 to 3 splash damage. If you want to make it, you know, 20 damage instead of 30 to 40 or something to do it, or even just make it as powerful and then make it worth 40 points. I mean, that's 20 points more than or less than a Bloodthirster or a Bloodletter here. Or a Fleshhound. So my god, give this guy some freaking splash damage so it's actually going to be viable to bring that freaking axe out, because doing a single attack even with the slight increased damage and armor piercing, it's just not worth the points. So freaking either decrease the cost of the axe dramatically or give us some freaking splash damage there so it's much more viable of an option. The other unit I would like to see just totally reworked is the Soulgrinder here. I mean, he's got his Harvester cannon is perfectly fine. He's a good ranged damage dealer, but he's a Soulgrinder of Khorne, damn it. And you're giving him a part of the cost here is you're getting a free bonus attack here, which is actually pretty damn good. So why the hell is your Warp Claw so crappy? It's like slightly increase the damage, add a bunch of splash damage here, and then this guy would be totally viable in melee. It's like, make him a nightmare to deal with in melee, and then people will use him in melee, and then they can get the most out of both worlds here. But as of right now, it seems like he misses his attacks pretty frequently, whereas you can do, you know, 90 to 150 at range, or you can do 45 to 60 splash of 2. So add splash to 4. That would be worthwhile, and maybe increase the damage to like 60 to 70. I mean, even if you just added a shit ton of splash on this guy, you could leave it the same way it is, and then it would still be pretty viable. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on changing the cooldown to the claw to be like a 2-turn cooldown instead of the 3, and then you keep this guy in melee range instead of going back and forth and alternating between range and melee. I guess I would be curious to know what your guys' thoughts are there. But as of right now, it's like you're spending all this points to have this unit to be able to shoot at range, and then you have it just you're getting very mixed messages. So increase his melee so he's a nightmare. That's all I'm going to say. Another unit that I think doesn't quite feel very good is the Bloodcrusher. So I think there's several ways that you could fix this to make them better. Add a little splash damage to their Hellblade. Increase the damage they do on the devastating charge, because you can do double devastating charge, and even if both of those attacks end on the same unit, because it's 22 to 30 damage, it won't squad wipe people. So increase the damage by 10, and then if you do a double devastating charge, that should kill most medium tier infantry, if not almost kill them. Or I suppose you could just add a free attack like a 2-turn cooldown, which would be like a bite with the crazy dog slash bull things here, but then you'd have to create some sort of animation, I guess, for it, which I think would be less viable. But you just need to do a little something here. I suppose alternatively you could increase the base damage a little bit more so they hit and do more damage, because effectively all you did is give them the regular Hellblades with some increased momentum, but at only 3 models here you just can't get enough kills. So splash damage, increased devastating charge ability, or an extra attack, and I think these guys would be super viable and really fun to use to help you. But as of right now, it just doesn't quite feel like you get enough bang for your buck for the 90 points, because I mean the equivalent to that would be like the Assault Marines, and you know, they get crack grenades, they get jump infantry, they get armor piercing, they can buff themselves. You know, these guys don't get the, I suppose the other options, you could give them the Murderous Tide since they're Bloodletters, and that would significantly increase the crit chances of everybody else. I suppose that would be an excellent way to add a little additional bonuses here. I suppose you could maybe do Murderous Tide on the Skull Cannons too, because you got Bloodletters there, and then it would just continually encourage you to have guys grouped together to increase the damage. I just think that it needs to slightly be reworked here, because the Chaos just doesn't feel like they're in a great spot now. So I think if you just kind of made a little bit of changes like that, these guys would feel a lot better. That actually reminds me, the other thing I'd like to see changed, and this goes for every faction, is everything that has a charge attack, instead of just saying it does that kind of damage, please, for the love of God, say how much splash is in the text for all these charge attacks, because for most of them it's 5, other ones it's more. So just clarify, especially for newer players, so they know, because there's been multiple games where I've had people get really frustrated where they're charging through thinking they're going to kill all my units, and then they're like, what the heck, it only did damage to 4 or 5 units, so that was going to do completely squad wipes. And it's like the description does not tell them that, and therefore you should just add a sentence in there to say how much splash is in every ability. And the other thing I forgot to mention that I'd like to see, since I'm on my charging tirade here, is I really think the battering ram ability here should not have the ability to miss. I think if you're sacrificing your attack chances, these charge attacks should be guaranteed hits. So, you know, using the battering ram ability here, whatever is the final target, that should be a guaranteed hit, because anybody you charge through, I think, is a guaranteed hit for the damage. So likewise, the Ogryns, the Bloodletters, Bloodcrushers, whatever they're called, these guys, anybody that has a charge attack, it should be a guaranteed hit, in my opinion. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Because there's nothing worse than you're sacrificing your attacks and then you end up missing, because that's just freaking terrible. For the orcs here, I like a lot of the changes that you guys made. The only thing I'd like to see is if you miss your healing chance, I'd like it to be like you get a 10% damage buff, like orcs are angry or something, or enraged, and then it would give them a slight damage increase. So yes, I know he already gives you this AoE effect, but there's nothing worse than you taking out a model that you're trying to heal and dropping your damage by 20%. So it's like, give us 10% back to have like an enraged ability if they end up taking some hits or something, because then it would feel much better to have somebody wiped out. So I'd like to see that happen. And for the love of God, please give back the splash damage to the power claws. I suspect you took it away because you're trying to encourage people to do more with the mega Nobz, but you know, the Nobz were excellent. They were a fun unit to use. You buff the range so much that it really takes away from the melee. So please just give us back some splash damage with these power claws here. That's all I'm going to say. I like a lot of the other changes here. I think it makes sense, but please bring back some splash to my beloved orcs. So for the Tau here, I think the Ethereal needs to be reworked a little bit. I'm not quite sure the best way to do this. Maybe dropping the HP bonus to a lower percentage and then making it just 1 AP, so you could stack these, and then if you're going to be able to do 1 AP, maybe changing the tiles to 1 tile, so you could have like, you could do a double buff to everybody around him. And then it wouldn't be too powerful even if they brought a second one, so then you could fly them in and double buff the following turn, and then you could like alternate back and forth. That might lead to a better infantry play. Now, I don't think that's going to get us into the same situation, because what we were having before is they were lasting a couple of turns, and then, you know, you keep it at a 3-turn cooldown, so I guess you can't guarantee that they're going to be able to stack it up every 2 turns and alternate like that, but by making it 2 AP, it just doesn't feel like it's in a good spot. So I would say slightly decrease the amount of HP bonus and keep it at a 1-turn lasting effect. And, you know, I think keeping it a 3 and a 2 is reasonable, but I would like to see them both be 1 AP cost, because I think that's going to help, because I think the pendulum actually went a little bit too far in terms of the ethereals. The other thing I'd like to see reworked is the shield drone, gun drone, marker drones. I don't understand your cost here. So either slightly decrease the cost of your gun drone, marker drone, or do it the other way where it's like you have a baseline gun drone. For 10 extra you get the marker drone, and then for 15 you get the shield drone, but it's like your most powerful drone, which is just a damage mitigation, is your default, and it's the cheapest. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because it's like your gun drones only have an armor piercing of 2, so it's not like they're going to do a ton of damage. The marker drones are good, so I'm not opposed to them costing some resources here. But it's also a 3-turn cooldown, so, you know, is that worth 20 points and losing a 15% damage mitigation? I don't think so. It doesn't make any damn sense. It's like, please rework that a little bit. And then the other thing I would like to see is I find that the Camouflage Field, I think lasting 5 turns is a little bit steep, because effectively what you can do is you can just cast it on the first turn, run them around the map, and then halfway through the map, then you expose them and you start getting kills. What I'd like to see is maybe a 3-turn lasting effect with like a 4-turn cooldown. Something where there's going to be at least 1 turn where they're going to be out in the open, where you can then just start sniping these guys down. But I think 5 turns is probably a little bit too much. Same with the Ghost Kill here. I would just like to have a little more strategic play. That way you're not just casting the invisibility on the very first turn and then you're just trying to guess, like, what do they have, where are they? You know, I think those are fun mechanics, and I definitely like the camouflage. It's very unique, but lasting 5 turns just seems a little bit ridiculous, so I would like to see that changed as well. And then the other thing I'd like to see changed is, I think it's a little bit ridiculous that this heavy rail rifle has the same range. You know, I mean, look at this thing. Yeah, it's a big, beefy gun, but you can't tell me that's the equivalent to this frickin' big-ass weapon here. I mean, come on. So I'd like to, because what I would like to see is for more people to be encouraged to bring the hammerhead. So I think how you could encourage that is by having this guy stay at a range of 12, and then you just nerf this guy's heavy rifle range to 9 or 10. And that way there's a little bit of a difference, but right now it's like, well, I can spend, you know, 310 points for this unit, or I can spend 220 for this one that's like Hammerhead Light. But he also has a missile system which he's going to be able to use, and this other missile, whereas the Hammerhead, it's like, okay, I get some pulse carbines that I have to get kind of close to be able to squad wipe somebody out. It's like, give me a break. So I would just like to see a little change there. And I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts? Should the railgun be a little bit cheaper because it doesn't have any splash? I don't know. It just feels a little bit awkward. So, because I would like to see people be every build to be kind of viable, and I just don't feel like that's the case now. I mean, the only time I ever see the hammerheads used are when you're playing against the Astra Militarum, which is great because that's specifically a kind of match where this guy has been was specifically created for. But at the same time, it's like, well, I can just use these smart missile systems because it's a free attack and wipe out Ogryn Squad to stop them from using momentum gains. And if I have somebody with a marker light, I can get a guaranteed seeker missile shot from way outside of range. So it's like, I would just like to see that nerfed a little bit, especially in the setting where you have a cadre that can guarantee that you have an auto hit ability. It's like, just kind of tweak that a little bit to encourage more diverse gameplay. And I would say the breachers are still a little bit OP. If you're not going to make changes to Ethereal, I think it's reasonable to keep the breachers where they're at. I mean, it's just going to force the opponent to focus them down before they get into combat. But if you're going to make some changes to the Ethereal to make the double buff a little more viable and feasible, then you probably need to slightly decrease the base damage to the plasma pulse blaster here. They're little magic shotguns. But I think otherwise most things for the Tau feel pretty good where they're at here. And then again, so Astra Militarum, I really like the changes that they made for the Astra Militarum. I think they really balanced them out a lot better and they feel more viable. The issue is there's really only 1 or 2 good build variants that you can have, and I'd like it to be more, because I mean, effectively your opponent knows you're going to be doing a heavy infantry or a heavy armor build, and I'd just like to see an infantry build be much more viable. So, you know, I think the Castellan's pretty good. The tank commander, I like what you did with the changes here. I feel like Blitz'em needs to be reworked a little bit. I would like it either to be a lot higher graze chance, so then it increases the survivability of the tank, or you make it like a charge feature where effectively they can charge out of danger and through the opponent, kind of giving them the same kind of effect that you get with run them over. You know, that way you can get the tank out of danger. So I'd like to see something like that instead of just giving them a single attack. And then the other thing to realize is with Blitz'em is if you have Blitz'em equipped and then you use the Pound 'em to Dust, you don't get a double Blitz attack. I tried that out. You only get a single attack. So it's like you can't even be like, oh, okay, there's medium tier infantry. I got this melee attack. I'm going to do it twice. With this, it's still only once. So just keep that into consideration. That's considered an ability, not an attack, so therefore the Pound 'em to Dust will not count as a double attack. Ogryns, for their changes, what I would like to see is a slight HP buff, maybe 180 health per model. That way, because effectively what you're doing is you're having a lower armored, but trying to work with a graze chance or give them a slightly increase to the grazes. It just feels like they're not quite tanky enough as an Ogryn should be. And again, I'd like to see some infantry play be viable. So either the way to make that is by dramatically increasing the strength of your infantry, or doing minor changes to everybody else. The only other thing is with Bodyguard, I would like, in addition to the bonus HP, I'd like to see that increase their graze chances as well. So that way, you know, it makes sense for you to be using these kind of abilities and wasting your AP trying to keep your commanders alive and then not sacrificing the Ogryns in exchange. So I'd just like to see something like that. The Kasrkrn. I keep thinking about these guys, like, what would I like? You know, I still feel like they have so much potential, but they're not quite here. So I feel I'm not sure the best way to do this. I keep thinking about it. It's like you either increase their armor piercing and make one so it's like an anti-armor killer, and then the other one is just a whole bunch of shots. The other option is what you could do, I suppose, is with your hot shot, you could just take away the 3-turn invisible thing, so it would just be throughout the whole match, and then these guys could just be sitting there dropping mines on strategic command points, and you just know you're going to have to run over the mine when you get there. I guess that would make it so these guys would be worth the points and be very frustrating to battle with, and it would be kind of a fun mechanic if you're trying to create something new. But by making it the visibility only lasts 3 turns, effectively, and then you made it the mine itself have like 2 HP or something, it's like anything can kill it. So I would just like to see that if you didn't want to change the stats here. So I think that's one way you could do this, is then you'd have 2 mines that would just be permanently invisible for the match. The other option, what I'd like to see is just default, at least get them armor piercing of 4. But the other thing I'd like to see changed is the overcharged salvo. I think it's fine to have the increased shots, the increased armor piercing, maybe doubling the armor piercing to 2, and then making it a 2-turn cooldown instead of a 3-turn cooldown. But at 3 turns, it just doesn't feel like it's viable enough to be able to get used enough, because, you know, you're talking about using that ability 3 times on a match maybe. And you just need to get the damage output on these guys higher. Even when they're all buffed, they just don't feel like they're quite in a good enough spot here. You know, the other thing I was toying with is maybe giving an ability where it would increase the armor piercing, but I think then your vehicles are going to be way too powerful. So I guess those are my thoughts here. What are your guys' thoughts? How would you make changes to these guys to make them more viable? Because I would really like to see an infantry build be viable. Because effectively right now, the only infantry build is go mass Cadian shock troops, get them all killed, get as much momentum, and then use a death strike in exchange for these guys' lives to try to wipe out as many units as possible. And that doesn't feel like a very good situation. I mean, the bayonets are good. So most people are doing a bayonet builds, but I haven't found that the mass las guns work because they only have 1 armor piercing. I suppose you could increase the armor piercing for these as well, but again, it just feels like they just need to be reworked here. The other thing I'd recommend, speaking on my infantry tirade here, is I'd like to see the heavy weapon squad because they cost 100 points. So with their setup, I'd like it to be you get 5 evasion. And so then they, after they're totally set up, then you'd be, I don't know, is 5 be too much, you guys think? Because that would be 30 evasion. That might be a pain in the ass once you get it all the way up there. But the chances of them getting up to full 6 stacks, I think, is pretty unlikely, given how quickly you can close the difference. So maybe 5 would be too much per stack. 2? Well, they have -10 though, is a thing. So even if they had 30, that would only be 20 evasion, but that's still pretty high. I don't know. I think you could debate about what kind of evasion, but I feel like with each setup they should be getting some evasion, so they should be harder and harder to hit the more they're set up here. That way they're not so easy to just be sniped from range, because right now almost anything can kill them with only 3 armor and 75 HP per unit. It's like you have to keep them so far away, but then you don't want to move them because then you're going to lose your setup. So it's like, it's this, you got kind of these conflicting priorities here. So I would just, I think giving them some evasion would probably be the best way. I suppose the other thing you could do is you could give them some bonus health, maybe per evasion, or not per evasion, per setup, but I think that would be a little bit confusing to be stacking on top of, you know, the commissar. So I think evasion's probably the best way to go there. The other thing I'd like to see changed is the harassing fire. I think it's reasonable to keep it at 1 turn, but what I'd like to see, instead of making it enemies adjacent to each other, I'd like to see it be, you know, just select 3 units within a, you know, 3 tiles or something like that, or 4 tiles, kind of similar to what the Hexmark Assassin, I think is what it is. Hexmark Assassin? I'm trying to think of what that Necron unit is. Yeah, Hexmark Destroyer, that's what it is. Because, you know, make it somewhat similar to the multi-threat Eliminator here, where you can just select those 3 units, and then that would make more sense with your divided attacks and things as well, because you're sacrificing to be able to affect those 3 units. I think that would make the multi-laser be a much more viable build. You know, if you're going to do it that way, you can even increase the cost up to, you know, 20 points or something like that too, make it a little more expensive, but it would make it way better, because then you're lowering the movement, so they're not going to be able to close the distance on you. You can then stack that up with Psyker, you know, Maelstroms to be able to stop movement, and then maybe things like that would make it more viable for some infantry, and also some zone of control. Could be some fun synergizing of effects there, because right now I never see the multi-laser used. It's either the heavy flamer or occasionally the plasma cannon. But I think if you make some changes like that, and then the other thing I'd recommend is the Dozer Blade. Bring back the Dozer Blade attack. Whatever you did, you broke that ability when you fixed the charge ability, so bring back that Dozer Blade. So just make it so it's on the UI all the time. So if you're in melee, you can then use the Dozer Blade, and then I don't know if you want to give the Dozer Blade a zone of control or not. I suspect that's probably where some errors happen there, but it could make it more interesting that you could sit there and have a vehicle, because then effectively, if it did have a zone of control, then you could be using these chimeras as your melee frontline troops to help hold the line, and that could be very interesting, because that's the big thing that doesn't feel good, is really the only guys that have melee attacks are your Psyker, who is not going to win that, or your Ogryn squads. So I think if you do it that way, that's, well, I guess obviously your Commissar and your Castellan, but again, you're not going to want those guys to be there, and then your Cadian shock troops, you know, having them try to hold the line, they just don't have enough HP. So I think that could be a very interesting thing, and encourage people to bring the Chimeras with the additional kit here by giving them that zone of control. I think that could lead to some very fun abilities, and then if you charge them into the middle of a big squad of units, then if they're trying to run away, then you can get zone of control attacks with the Dozer Blade too, and make it just a big pain in the ass unit, where it's like, oh my god, am I going to have to blow up this Chimera and explode in front of all my guys around there, or am I going to have to do something else. So I just think that could lead to some very situational, fun encounters. Now, maybe a little too OP, but I think it would still be much, much more interesting, especially because right now it just doesn't feel like that's in a good spot. Oh, and there was one other thing I wanted to discuss too, speaking of units that never get used, is we got to do something with these intercessors here. Nobody ever uses these freaking guys because they suck so bad. I mean, their bolt rifle has 2 armor piercing, and then the auto bolt rifle has 1 armor piercing. Are you telling me these bolt guns have the same armor piercing as a las gun? These guys are shooting rocket propelled grenades that explode on contact, and it has 1 to 2 armor piercing. Freaking increase the armor piercing of these weapons, and then people will start to use them more. You know, it's like, please make some changes here so people will want to use intercessors, because right now there's no reason that somebody is going to want to. The only people that use intercessors are beginner players, and they get totally pissed off because they're like, yeah, these are the, you know, embodiment of the Space Marines, and they sit there and they can't do jack shit. Give them more armor piercing. I mean, my God, please. And likewise with the armor piercing, you know, you're given these bolt pistols here. You have them at armor piercing of 3 for your Space Marines here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So please, when you're doing that, can you increase these guys' armor piercing to like 3-2 so they can defend themselves? I mean, giving them a bolt pistol with an armor piercing of 1, they just can't do jack shit. So they need, or even get it to 2. I mean, please stop making it an armor piercing of 1. They just can't do anything. They can't even defend themselves. They can't kill something that's almost dead. It's like, please just buff the bolt pistol a little bit more so they can do more damage. If you want to keep the bolt pistols with the grot blasters at 1, fine. If they're grots, not an issue. But my God, please increase the bolt pistols armor piercing to 2 or 3. That's something else I wanted to mention. So what are your guys' thoughts about these changes? Do you agree? Am I crazy? Are there things that you think that should be changed that I didn't mention? What are your thoughts? So please comment below, and maybe, who knows, maybe somebody from Slytherin that can actually make some of these balancing changes may see this video and have be able to carry out some of these changes, or maybe you have better ideas than I do, and I'd be curious to see what your guys' thoughts are. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.